Half a day, the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement is calling this virtual public hearing to order. It is now 5:08 p.m. on a Friday, December 4th, 2020. Notice of this evening's virtual hearing was provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and local media on November 27, 2020 for the 5-day notice and December 2nd, 2020 for the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of open government law. The rules of conduct of this virtual hearing is the host of this hearing will mute all participants until called upon by the chair. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and begin by stating their name for record-keeping purposes. The purpose of this virtual public hearing is to receive testimony on the message and communications number 35GL-20-2341, Guam Environmental Protection Agency transmittal to y Legislature in Guahan, of the proposed rules and regulations pursuant to the Administrative Adjudication Act for the underground storage tanks. I would like to acknowledge Senator Tello Taitukui, who's joined me here today. Masi, Senator. Now to begin our agenda with message and communications number 35GL 20-2341. It's Guam Environmental Protection Agency transmittal to y Legislature in Guahan for the proposed rules and regs for the underground storage tanks. So just to provide some background information, the rules and regs being presented to the committee today have been developed through the AAA process. The rules and regs have been approved by US EPA Office of Underground Storage Tanks and US EPA Region 9. It was publicly heard by Guam EPA Board and adopted under resolution number 19-002. It was approved by the Attorney General of Guam, the Governor of Guam, and is now received by the legislature, which is up for review and adoption. The underground storage tank program was established and codified under Chapter 76 of Title 10 Guam Code Annotated in 1989, which states one of the purposes is to enact and establish regulations, guidelines, standards, and policies that ensure consistent cleanup of regulated substances and mitigation of the damage they cause. The underground storage tank rules and regs, an important regulatory achievement, has received input and guidance from US EPA as part of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, or RCRA, subtitle I, that was developed nationally in response to spills of petroleum into the environment. By adopting these rules, it would ensure that Guam's rules are as stringent, if not more, to the federal government. There are currently 282 permitted underground storage tanks, some above our northern Guamland's aquifer. And the regulations, should they be adopted, will ensure greater measures to approve designs, construction, and operation of underground storage tanks, ensure containment to prevent leakage into our precious northern Guamland's aquifer, authorize cleanups and fines, and create a process for abandoned underground storage tanks. I would like to now invite Guam EPA to provide a presentation on the underground storage tank regulations for review by this body. So I believe one of the members is here to present, if not more. First, before we receive testimony. Is it, so
Hi,
Walter?
Senator Perez, it'll be myself presenting.
Okay, great. So we'll get the presentation set up. So my staff, okay, great.
Okay. Good evening, Hafaday, and thank you, Senator Perez, Senator Tadwi, and any other committee chair members that are present, and anyone else actually attending the public hearing. This is a PowerPoint slide presentation that was provided and presented at the public hearing September 11, 2019 to all Guam USD tank owners and stakeholders. And it's about 33 slides, so I'll try and go through it as quickly as I can, and question and answers can be at the end if you would be okay with that, Senator Perez.
Oh, yes, yeah, definitely, and we'll receive other testimony.
Okay, just for the record, Guam Environmental Protection Agency, Title 22, Division 10, Chapter 50, is known as the Underground Storage Tank Regulations. This is the public hearing 35GL-20-2341, presentation on December 4th, 2020. Next slide, please. The agenda is pretty much the Administrative Adjudication Law, also known as the AAA process. Title 5 of Chapter 9, Guam Code Annotated. Also the Guam Underground Storage Tank often referred to as USTs throughout the presentation, Guam UST statutes, the amended Guam UST regulations, the SPA, acronym for State Program Approval, which is what Guam EPA is trying to achieve, the federal regulation implementation deadlines, and I'm sorry, my screen is cut off at the bottom, so can't see the bottom. Next slide. Question and answers, I'm assuming. The Guam Underground Storage Tank Rules and Regulations development process, which is pretty much the AAA process. And this is just the flow chart that was developed and represents dates and timelines for meeting the AAA process. And we are currently way down here on the bottom right-hand corner, submit package to speaker. Again, I apologize, my screen is not completely showing everything, so I can't read the entire box there. Next slide. This was a fact sheet presented to our board of directors at a Guam EPA Board of Directors meeting in September 19, 2019. Next slide. I'm sorry. Next slide. This is the approval of the proposed revised UST regs from the Attorney General's office, which is probably one of our first and most major hurdles that we got over. Next slide. And this is the approval from the Governor Lou Leon Guerrero. Next slide. And this is just a Google map depicting the USTs located throughout the island. Emergency generator, retail gas stations, the DoD facilities, Department of Defense facilities, and so on. Next slide. This is the USTs on Guam. We have 282 permitted USTs. Primary owners are private, commercial, federal, and the local government. The distribution of USTs are above the groundwater protection zone, which is primarily in the north, along the shorelines and in residential villages. And that's our true Magas right there. Sorry, Walter. Next slide. Why do we need regulations? We need to implement enabling statutes. Again, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, Chapter 76, Article 1. Regulations are structured and used as a stringent enforcement tool. They increase prevention to decrease releases, and primarily is to protect the environment. We also need the regulations to meet our Energy Policy Act provisions and help us maintain and sustain federal grant funding for the underground storage tank program. Next slide. The Guam Underground Storage Tank Regulations is comprised of 13 articles, 1 through 13, and we'll go through each one individually. Next slide. State program approval, also known as SPA, the acronym SPA is, we are not currently a SPA state or a territory. Therefore, owners and operators of tanks must comply not only with Guam, but also US EPA requirements. The SPA approval will result in compliance with, Guam would have primacy, meaning owners and operators will be only responsible and have to speak with Guam EPA for any non-compliant issues. The proposed UST rules have been reviewed by Ms. Elizabeth McDermott. She's a Regulation Development and State Program Approval out of US EPA Office of Underground Storage Tanks in Washington. Next slide. Article 1 is scope and installation requirements for partially excluded UST systems. In this article, covers applicability of UST systems and the definitions and terms that will be used throughout the UST regulations. Next slide. The most common UST systems we may all know are your Your typical retail service gas stations found throughout the island. This is just depicting the tank underground, the retail service station, the tank monitors, the delivery operator, and the dispensers. Next slide. The federal USD regulations and Guam USD regulations is also incorporating to capture these other USD systems, the emergency generator tanks, primarily found at hotels, restaurants, and throughout the island for emergency generator systems. Airport hydrant fuel distribution systems, field constructed USD systems, the big constructed systems, most of them owned by the DoD facilities, Department of Defense facilities, and flow-through tank systems, also known as oil-water separators. Next slide. Excuse me. Article 2 is the USD systems design, construction, and installation, possibly the most important aspect and component of the entire regulations. This covers tanks and piping, installer certification, under dispenser containment, and any upgrades to existing systems. Next slide. So USD systems are these tanks that you see now, and you only see them right before they are installed. They're fiberglass reinforced plastics. They're steel tanks, but all of them have to be cathodically protected or rust-proofed prior to entering the ground. Next slide. Again, with piping, there's rigid piping, there's flexible piping. They all need to be required to have secondary containment, meaning double-walled, also corrosion cathodically protected from rust. All components of the system, again, have to be cathodically protected. Next slide. Secondary containment. New or replaced tanks and piping must have secondary containment. Again, this is in our USD law, and it's just being elaborated on what meets secondary containment. The entire USD system now has to be, any new installation of any new USD system has to be completely secondarily contained. It's a second measure of protection for our environment, basically is what it is. Next slide. Under dispenser containment is the new dispenser must have under dispenser containment, a UDC, must be liquid-tied and allow for visual inspection and be continuously monitored for leaks. These are normally and commonly found underneath the dispensers at retail gas stations, and where most of the leaks have occurred are in these areas. Next slide, I'm sorry. Article 3 is general operating requirements, covers spill and overfill control, the notification, reporting, and record keeping required, and USD systems testing and inspections. Next slide. USD inspection tools help us go out and do our job to inspect these USD facilities. There are a lot of challenges, especially under our current COVID-19 crisis. But when we do inspect, other challenges would be the heavy manhole covers that are having to be lifted. And down here in one of the pictures represents a ground penetrating device, helps locate abandoned tanks, tanks that have been abandoned in the past. Next slide. These are examples of spill prevention equipment. The ones on the left are spill buckets, commonly referred to as spill buckets, where the fuel delivers fuel to a tank. They'll tap into this, and this is a spill bucket. It's a spill prevention equipment so that any releases are contained in this bucket. On the right, we call them submersible turbine pump sumps. It's a fuel piping supply and return. into the UST system. And this too is required secondary containment in this area. Next slide. Overfill prevention equipment examples are must be periodically tested, and flow restrictors such as ball floats are no longer allowed. When installation, you have to use the two options, visual and audio tank overfill alarm for the operator to know that he's overfilling the tank, or it's called a fill pipe flapper device, and it restricts fuel from entering the tank as soon as the tank is full. And these devices are meant to keep fuel in the tank and in the delivery truck and not into the environment. Next slide, please. Article 4 covers release detection, the methods of release detection for tanks and piping, the release detection record keeping requirements, and testing of these release detection equipment. Next slide. Article 5 covers release reporting, investigation, and confirmation. Reporting suspected releases, investigating releases, cleanup of spill and overfill. And these are examples of an automatic tank gauge and a tank pressure test being conducted on these release detection devices. Next slide. Article 6 is release response action. Basically, following verbal notification of a suspected release, owners and operators must follow up with written notice within 3 business days. Also details how the corrective action procedures will be taken by the owner, the operator of the tank, and the notification requirements. So it's a kind of like a guideline checklist for what owners and operators need to do in the event of a spill or release. Next slide. Article 7 is out of service USD systems and closure. There's temporary closure, permanent closure, and required site assessment on either case. Next slide. Closure and change in service, temporary closure requirements. There are requirements for temporary closure up to 3 months. After that, the next deadline will be 12 months. After 12 months, permanent closure. And in permanent closure, under our regulations, proposed, the tank system needs to be removed from the ground. Next slide, I'm sorry. Article 8 is financial responsibility. In this article, all the definition and terms that are related to financial responsibility, and owners and operators must demonstrate financial responsibility for taking corrective action and compensation through various mechanisms available, and they are listed on the Article 8, in Article 8. Next slide. Article 9 is lender liability, and it's primarily ownership of the USD system and also the liability and management of USD system. So it's specific to who's liable for the in the event of a release and who, and it's really meant, I won't get into that, but that's what it is. Next slide. Article 10 is operator training. There are 3 classes of operators, class A, B, and C. Article 10 covers the training required for these operator classes, the retraining frequency, and the documentation and proof of complete and satisfactory passing these tests. Next slide. Article 12 is the permits and variances. USD require permits to install. You need a permit to operate, modify, close, change in ownership or operator. In this Article 12 also is the permit fee schedule and the permit conditions. Next slide. Article 13 is enforcement. The purpose for enforcement, field citation, we also call it the expedited settlement, and delivery, deposit, and acceptance prohibition, where Guam EPA can through the administrator can prohibit delivery to underground storage tanks that are substandard or non-compliant. Next slide. Okay, field citation is expedited settlement where we compare it to like a traffic ticket. If it's not a major violation or a non-compliant matter that can be corrected on the spot during the inspection and no longer than 30 days. Anything after that, it wouldn't be a field citation or a traffic ticket. It would be a full enforcement action. And it's something most commonly referred to, or we see it as them not doing their record keeping and requirements. Next slide. Federal implementation timeframes. We put this in there just to remind the stakeholders that the U.S. Federal regulations were enacted in 2015, and there was some implementation timeframes that were needed to be met. Some of them were same year, 2015. Some of them were given 1 year. Some of them up to 3 years. So it's good to know that because of our previous regulations that we did have, owners and operators on Guam already were aware of this, and we were hammering them about these federal requirements. And happy to report that most of these implementation timeframes have been met by USC owners on Guam. But they're recurring. So these are we just put this in so that they were aware of these federal timelines. Next slide. And this is an example of a sacrificial anode, where an anode is something that attracts rust and to itself and not the USC system. But anyway, this is a questions and comments section if you had any questions. But that is pretty much the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, yes, thank you, Michael. What we'll do is we'll just move on to others who are here to testify before we open up the floor to questions. So please stay put if you don't mind. All right, so I would like to invite the administrator to provide his testimony regarding the regulations.
Thank you, Senator Perez. I think the plan was that Vince is going to read my written testimony, but I do have some things that I'd like to say. So my 25 plus years with Guam EPA, this was the second program that I took over way back when. And so this is pretty close to the heart. So what Mike had illustrated during his presentation, put it this way, these regs are so critical to ensure the safety of our environment, because you can't see these tanks, you can't see the plumbing, piping underground. There was one time up at Anderson Air Force Base, in lieu of a tank system for a UST, they actually buried a semi and a tanker all in one. So that's how far this program has gone. From the Wild West of the semi and the tanker being driven into a hole, and they were using that as a fuel tank, to something that is thoroughly monitored electronically, as well as, if you want, manually, to ensure that the volume stays in the tank and it's all registered. It's going off the pump or whatever system it's done. So this is a very crucial program because some of the past tanks and systems leaked quite a bit of fuel, the product, and it was unbeknownst to anybody, because that's the way that was where technology was then. So where we're at now is outstanding. The team is outstanding. They have their records, both hard copy and electronic. But this is just the next step up to make sure that we are still in total compliance. And as in the preliminary discussion, it gives us the opportunity to take the lead on this, and not necessarily have something against the federal government. Sometimes when the federal government does enforcement, none of that the fines and fees stay on Guam unless there's something previously negotiated. So not that we're looking for flying defeats, but if all of this happens, then that's something that will remain on Guam and be beneficial to Guam and not get lost in the U.S. Treasury system. And with that, I will just close it up. I will pass it to Vince to read the written testimony. But this is a very good regulation. It's an awesome team that's managing it. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Is there anybody else here that would like to testify on behalf of the rules, regarding the rules? Okay, I see some people that are linked, but I don't see any takers. Okay, so I guess we'll start with questions. So first of all, I just want to thank Guam EPA for their efforts in producing this 1,000-page rules and regulations for very important, for regulated substances that can really harm the environment and our people. So thank you so much for your persistence. So I guess some of the questions that I have, or maybe some highlights perhaps. So in your presentation, Michael, you one of the slides, it shows there's roughly about 282 permitted underground storage tanks. And so one of the rules and regs basically requires a containment system. And a lot of these underground storage tanks are located over our Guamlands aquifer. And you had mentioned earlier that you started to implement this back in 2015. Are there any underground storage tanks that do not have this double containment system?
Yes, Senator. There are still, I want to say, a few single wall systems that are still out there. And those are the ones we primarily inspect more frequently than the other double wall tanks. And again, they're always in compliant. And because we have no enforcement authority to force them to close these tanks and install secondary containment until such time where they upgrade up to 50% of that system, we can't force them to change it. We just ask them, please, to continually monitor very closely with all the modern tank release detection systems that are available to them. And again, the few that are still there, we've been assured that there are schedules to have the single wall tanks replaced, and that was just by one of the major retail stations companies, and they assured us they will be replacing them in the coming years. But again, we are very concerned, and hence that is why we put it in our UST statute and in this current proposed UST regs, and we feel very adamant, and even the feds have had it. It's any new installation has to have secondary containment. Now, there's no way around it.
Okay, thank you. In regards to monitoring, so I think, Walter, you're mentioning that it's electronically monitored. So is it a continual real-time sort of monitoring that takes place? Or how are we monitoring these underground stuff?
But I'll defer to the technical team.
Okay, so Michael, do you have an understanding of how these tanks are monitored? Because I know you come by and you inspect their monitoring sheets, but how soon can we know if there's potential problems of an underground storage tank according to these rules and regs? How stringent is it?
It's they're very stringent actually, and release detection methods. There are a variety of mechanisms that are out there and available and recognized by industry standards. There's continuous statistical release detection, which is constantly monitoring the system. That's probably one of the foremost and best ones, because it's constantly, every time somebody picks up that lever at a dispenser gas station, it's doing a test, and it's doing a test on the piping. But at the same time, that same tank system, it's called an automatic tank gauge. It's constantly measuring the fuel in the tank. And that's just one of the methods. Then for some other facilities, like the emergency generator systems, they're required to test their system at least once every 30 days. So again, fortunately, we have good UST owners and operators on island, and they've bought the state-of-the-art equipment that can do these. It's a 0.2 gallon per hour test. And it's required every 30 days that you have to show us that that test was performed and it passes. And annually we ask them as a good faith, can they program their system to do a 0.1, which finds an even more minute leak. It's a 0.1 gallon per hour test. And again, I'm happy to report that most of the owners and operators have and are starting to use this type of systems. But again, there are other release detection methods because there's different systems out there. And we're just finding out now that the Department of Defense facilities have these real very technical and complex systems that again, I'm still just beginning to learn, but they're having to comply with the same requirements that a UST at a gas station has to comply with, which is great news for us. And so we're bringing them into this universe, the Guam EPA UST universe, and we're having them to hold up to the same standards as Joe Cruz gas station down the road here.
Okay, that's great. It's good to hear. So,
Senator, real
yes.
quick. So, and sorry, Mike, we're not stringent, we're protective of the environment. So.
Okay, thank you. Is this program more stringent or equally stringent? Because in one of your slides, you mentioned that these underground storage tank users are going to apply, basically have to comply with Guam EPA only. So is this as stringent as the federal government, or is it more stringent? Are these rules and regs more stringent or equally stringent?
They're as stringent, and in some cases, I think they're even more stringent. The federal regulations don't require permits. We do require permits. We call them registration, UST registrations. Owner and operator training. Federal requirements require one-time training. Guam EPA requires every 2-year training. So there are some components of our UST regs that are more stringent, but in no case anywhere in the regs is it less stringent because it wouldn't, we couldn't get state program approval if any of our regulations were less stringent than the federal requirements.
Okay, thanks. And as far as capacity, what is the capacity needs of the agency to carry out this program consistently? Do you have enough staff, resources to do this? Or how much, what is the requirement to accomplish this?
Can I answer that before you say anything? Okay, like any other program in division, to be quite honest, Senator, you know we always could use additional help. We are restricted by our budget and sometimes by the amount of finances that actually turn over within the program. Again, as I stated earlier, these guys have it down. They have their system down. They have work down. I'm very, very impressed with the way they operate. And when the US EPA comes in, I generally I've only heard good things. Some of the records from way back is the things that they've questioned. So yes, we can always use more people, and I'm sure between Conchita, Vince, Mike, Don, and Mebony, they'll probably say, yeah, we could use 10 more people, and that's not a joke. It sounds crazy, but yeah, of course we could. But I'm not quite sure we're there on the budget wise, and approving these regulations may put us on the way forward that we can start trying to get more people in. And with that, Katrina, Vince, Mike, Don, and Ebony, please say what you want. Don't worry about my thought on it. I know you guys are boots on the ground, so please tell the senator how you feel.
Okay, so this is Conchita, Senator, and thank you for that question. For hazardous waste program, we have a few people, We have one person for hazardous waste, one person for underground storage tanks, and that's Michael O'Malley. One person for above ground storage tanks. And so you know where I'm going on this, which is one, in terms of succession planning, it's not, we can't do it. What we can do, or what we have been doing, is cross training, but that is not a sustainable system. And so we do need more staff, because relying on one person to handle one section of a program, I think, well, it's not protective of what needs to be done. And it just makes sense. You can't do succession planning if you don't have people to succeed you.
Yes, I hear you. Does the federal government provide any, I know you guys receive consolidated grants. Is there opportunity to receive increased funding with the passage or adoption of these rules and regulations to ensure that you have, successional planning and proper staffing? So Walter basically said you need 10 more people. Is that?
No, I mean, I think 10 would be, 10 obviously would be fantastic. And I have to take a look at what the law actually allocates for the hazardous waste program. And I keep thinking that it's around, the number's about 7. I need to double check on the law that bifurcated the solid waste program and the hazardous waste programs. Because when that happened, it created positions. But, if you don't have money, then, you can't very well fill those positions. So to answer your question, for the underground storage tanks, Mike or Vince, I think are the numbers the same, or did we increase just a little bit? I know we do receive money. I just can't remember, what the numbers look like for FY21. But I can tell you for FY for because it is a consolidated grant, which means that, the administrator is authorized to utilize the funding for those programs that do not receive federal funds. For example, like our administrative staff, the people that support, our work, they don't receive programmatic funding, but that's what the consolidated grant does, is it helps pay for that. Same thing with solid waste. Believe it or not, Senator, we do not get any money from the federal government for solid waste. But for hazardous waste, I know that our numbers doubled. And that had a lot to do with lobbying with headquarters. So for what I was at 30 years, we only saw close to 200. This for fiscal year 21, it doubled to 400. So again, it really depends on how, the needs of the agency. We're always very mindful of that. But it is my hope that at some point we're able to, implement succession planning and not wholly rely on one person to handle complex programs such as the underground storage tank. You saw that it's a huge, what did you say, 1,000-page document? Can you imagine all of that? And then it is really Michael O'Malley who is the primary, implementer of that for that one program. Thank you.
That's critical shortage of employees. Thank you for that response. So Michael, as far as what you see on the field, what is the longevity of these systems are you seeing?
Well, in the regs, there is a section there that we put, and it was based on industry standards. And I don't know if I think some of these systems can still get, it's called pollution liability, also financial responsibility. After so many years, and 30 years was the number, after 30 years of life, that's when they anticipate the tank should be replaced. And if you look at our regs, somewhere in our regs, we do have that there. I think it's in Article 2. After 30 years, the administrator can require you to permanently close and remove your USD system. And if you opt, you can replace it with a new secondarily contained USD system. Mm-hmm. Longevity, though, it's hard to say, Senator. Years ago, we were helping through the American Response Recovery Act, the ARA. We actually didn't help. We did it ourselves. We put out 10 GWA tanks and throughout the island at their different sewage systems. And some of the tanks came out, they looked brand new. These were stainless steel tanks, single walled. They looked brand new. We put out a few in Toto and Mongmong, and they were completely littered with rust and holes in it. So again, you never know what the tank looks like until you actually see it. And a lot of times it's a requirement. Anytime you put out a tank, we need to be present. And it goes a long way in determining what type of corrective action and site assessment is required. So again, it's hard to say. It depends on the soil conditions, the moisture and everything, and also the installation. So I think 30 years, that's why we put 30 years, and it's an industry standard 30 years, the life of any given tank.
Does that account for the, our tropical environment? We're close to the ocean, things tend to rust sooner.
And that's why we require also cathodic protection, which is all components of the USD system has to be cathodically protected, all piping, tanks, anything to do with the system.
Okay, thanks. And as far as those that have been removed, are they considered hazardous waste, and how are they disposed of?
The normal industry standard would be we have them empty the entire tank, and then they have to triple rinse it. They clean it and they rinse it 3 times, which renders it, and then they recycle it. If it's a metal tank, they'll cut it into pieces, send it to a recycler. If it's a plastic fiberglass tank, it'll be crushed, because we no longer allow them to reuse any tanks that are put out of the ground can no longer be reused or repurposed. They have to be demolished. And that's part of the closure requirement.
Okay. So you're saying that they can no longer be recycled anymore?
If it's a metal tank, it can be cut and recycled, yes. But
And
it cannot be repurposed.
And are they considered non-hazardous at that point?
Yes.
Okay, so they could be basically dumped in the landfill.
Hard fill, a permitted Guam EPA hard fill. That's where it can only go to a permitted hard fill.
Okay. All right. So on one of the slides you were talking about lender liability. Can you talk a little bit more about that one? No?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry. It's just financial responsibility, Article, I believe, 8 and 9, and lender liability are probably the most complex articles, and it really goes into detailing the amount of money a lender or an owner has to have because when you have a release, it costs, depending on how bad the release is, it costs anywhere in the thousands of hundred thousands. And so we want to make sure that they have enough insurance to cover and take corrective action. So the lender liability portion, it just really clarifies. So you have a lot of property owners that sublease their properties to another facility, and the facility installs a tank. Well, it might be their tank, but we still go after the owner of the property. That is the ultimate. The ultimate thing is we go after who owns the property, and it's their liability. So lender liability kind of clarifies and provides legal terminology to clarify who is really responsible in the event of a release. Was it the USD owner and operator at the time, or is it the property owner? So that section is complicated and complex, and I hate that section the most, but I think it's probably the most critical in identifying, because we have no state cleanup funds, so we would have to go after the tank owner as the responsible party to perform the cleanup.
Oh, interesting. To your knowledge, do these underground storage tank operators, do they have the equipment to, address a spill? Are they in the ready in case the spill happens? Do they have the proper equipment to prevent it from reaching the environment? Or-
And it all goes back to notification. So in the regs, it says we need to be notified regardless of the amount or the quantity of the spill. The federal requirements is 25 gallons, but we say anything that causes a footprint greater than a vehicle at a gas station, report it to us. They do have these, if you go to a gas station, you'll see these spill containment equipment, which has absorbent material. It has booms and socks that help contain and do the cleanup. So small spills, these facilities and they are equipped and trained to do these small cleanups. Anything greater than the footprint of a car, we ask that they call, and they do have on hand their environmental contractors that would come in and they have their own equipment.
Okay, so, but are they required to have a certain amount of cleanup material or spill mediation material? Does these regs require a certain amount?
There's no certain amount that's specified in the regulations, but we just informed that that they be capable and have on hand spill response equipment that can address small spills
Okay.
at any given time.
Okay, so another question regarding certification. So there's A, B, and C. Can you speak a little bit more about the different types of certification?
So Class A would be your owner, like it would be like Mr. Leon Guerrero for Bank of Guam. He would be a Class A because he's the owner of the tank, and he would be the one responsible for getting financial responsibility, make sure that they do have coverage. A Class B is kind of like a hybrid, especially if it's in a small facility. Class A and Class B can share roles, but a Class B is really responsible for constantly monitoring the tank, release detection, making sure the pipe's not leaking, making sure the tank's not leaking. So that would be your Class B, and they would be more the ones to submit the permit applications, general information on the facility, ensuring that their operators are trained. A Class C would be your typical gas station attendant who goes out and fills up gas in your car, but he would know where the emergency stop button is, and he would know where the small spill cleanup containment area is. So he would at least be able to stop any more fuel from entering the environment. That'd be your basic Class C operator.
Okay. Okay. Okay, yeah, thank you. I think these are the questions that I have so far. Oh, I guess, yeah, maybe another question as far as permits. Can you talk about when these permits have to be renewed, and what are the reasons why you would not renew a permit?
So, so we decided, and our universe, it's a small universe compared to other states. So we have it's called a permit application, and all permits expire January 31st of any given year. So it's an annual requirement. Owners have to obtain operating permit annually, and it expires January 31st of any given year. The regulations say that to renew your application to operate, you have to submit your application 60 days prior to the expiration. So we start getting applications in at the beginning of November, and we process it, and we get our administrators to sign off on them, and we get them back to them by the end of January, and they're good for 1 year. The reasons people would not get a permit is if they don't complete their application package, meaning they don't show proof that they have financial responsibility, or they don't pay their permit fee, which is $250 per tank. Currently, that's what it is now. Or they're currently under a delivery prohibition, whereas the tank cannot accept any fuel at a time because of a non-compliant matter or a major violation, and that the administrator can revoke the permit at that time.
Does that package include monitoring documents? Are they required to
No.
provide any kind of documents about the status of their tanks?
No, currently they only have to submit the application or the renewal application, proof of financial responsibility, and pay their permit fee. The only time we see their records is when we actually request for it. If there was a suspected release and we respond to it, or we're doing a compliance evaluation inspection, which by law we're required to do every 3 years.
Okay.
Some people do turn in their release detection records and their entire financial responsibility package. And it is quite lengthy, but
Is there opportunity to put this online so it's easy to kind of monitor? So let's say the underground storage tank operator, is that part of your online? I know there's a Walters program that was supposed to be implemented. Is this a potential project? Because I think that 3 years might be too long to really kind of keep on top of some of these, you know, the potential harm that could happen if it does leak. Yeah, I think I see opportunities for a change. I mean, in regards to frequency of checks.
again, the hazardous waste management program is comprised of 4 employees. We do hazardous waste, we do underground storage tanks, and we do above ground storage tanks, and we also do emergency response, Senator. And we all share these responsibilities and roles. Again, but by law, we only are required to do compliance evaluation inspections every 3 years. However, we do visit the retail service stations more frequently, and we also look at records for non-compliance tank owners, and we visit them more frequently. They are on they're flagged, and if your tank is not compliant this year, we may visit you again next year. But again, we're a little short-handed currently. Not
Okay.
wanting to make excuses or anything, but I understand your concerns, and yes, we share your concerns that we should be monitoring these systems more frequently.
Yeah, so too bad Walter is not here. I would ask him that question. But maybe Conchita, are you available? Do you know anything about the Walters? I know that was one of the goals. Is Conchita still there? Or Michael, are you familiar with the Walters program? I know that was supposed to be one of the ways that that was going to streamline permitting. And is that still, what is the progress on that? I don't know if you can answer that.
Our permits are primarily reviewed by our program, and from us it goes straight to Walter. It doesn't require multiple program review, and so we pretty much just get the application and we review it, and if they submit it in time like they should, there is adequate time for us to get their permits to them by the end of January. But I am familiar with Walters, and we are currently updating our UST universe, all the information into Walters. But right now, our permits are not priority in terms of multiple program review. And so we are not at that state where they're asking us to review UST permit applications. We get it primarily hard copies, and we review it. Right now, we're getting all electronic copies, and we're reviewing them electronically. So it's making it a little bit more difficult for us, but I believe we'll still be able to manage it and get the permits out by the end of January.
So, Senator, with the Walters program is working, but it's being implemented in phases. I know there's been tremendous effort, especially in the area of the water side and building permits, which, you know, it's understandable because, you know, we do need to protect the water. But I'd like to also add that we're using Walters for the air program. I know there are some questions with respect to, you know, working out the details for the underground storage tanks, and then also with solid waste. So we're getting there. That's the short answer. We're getting there. It's not fully operational for all the programs within the agency, but we're working on it.
Thank you,
But
Conchita.
yeah.
It's, there was another question. Oh, can the public review these permits, the permit applications? Are they available for public review? It's a question for Michael, I guess.
You know what, Senator, I know that especially the big three, the mobile, the Shell IP&E, and SPP 76. I know they don't play well together, and they don't like sharing information with each other. So if they give us an application, I would need to check with our legal to find out whether it is public record.
Or
'Cause
proprietary
again,
information. That's really what
right.
it is. We have to be very careful with the proprietary information. But otherwise, I mean, if there's a public, I mean, when we issue a permit, we give notice, right, Mike?
No, we just
You just,
No.
okay. But there, I know that there's a requirement for us to put, to do listings online
yes.
by the federal government.
right. We
Right.
do have public record that of what like example, EPA Mobile down the road, how many tanks they have, how big their tanks are, what is their permit number, who is the operator. So we do have that information available. As far as the application, though, no one has ever really asked us to review another tank facility application. They've asked us through a FOIAs for information on a release at a facility, but that again, that's public information. But actual tank information stuff, we normally post that on our website.
But for the tanks, I mean, they're pretty standard, aren't they? I mean, the double wall tanks, I mean, I don't think there's anything, where I'm going on this, Senator, is that, you know, most of I believe all the petroleum industry, you know, they have to utilize certain tanks with specifications. There, you can't deviate from that. Right, Mike?
Correct.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you for answering my questions, and I appreciate you all being here this Friday evening. But I do want to also offer the floor to my colleague, Senator Taitigui, if she has any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's always bad to be the person that's holding up your dinner. So I'm not going to make it too long. But actually, you know, Madam Chair, you were very thorough on a lot of the questions I had. You had asked. I really appreciate it. It's a great learning experience about these underground tanks, and appreciate all the hard work that EPA does. And I'm sorry, Michael, the manpower. Hopefully, you'll get some more manpower to help you out with this. But what you're doing right now is commendable, considering the lack of help that you have. But you know, these rules and regs are they, how many every year, or not every year, but is it every 5 years that they come up for a revision on rules and regs? How many years?
The federal regs were drafted in 1988. The only reason the federal regs were changed because it was a presidential mandate. It was called the Energy Policy Act of 2005. Okay. And it incorporated, it required EPA to amend the current UST regulations. So from 88 to 2005, that was the only reason EPA went in and revised it was a presidential, it was a, I don't know,
Request
executive.
requirement. So,
Yes.
these are not supposed to be done like every 10 years, every 5 years at all. It just so happens that you guys are going through this and cleaning house, basically.
Yes.
So that brings me to the next question with regards to the cost. And I looked through the rules and regs and noticed that there's some fees and charges. Also mitigation or redemptions, and that is incorporated here. And, with time, so many years down the line, cost of inflation, things are more expensive. Can you do that without can you do that every 5 years on your cost and everything like that? Or how do you adjust those charges?
Initially, we were thinking of putting it in, but then somebody told us, do not put any fee schedule or any amount in your UST statute and law, put it in your regs, because then through our board of directors and their authority, I believe it's chapter 45, if we needed to amend or adjust our fee schedule, we could go through our board of directors.
Oh, okay. Well, you have that authority to do so. So, okay. Wow, that makes it a lot easier, not having to go through a whole well, I don't know if it's required for a AAA process to go through increasing your fees or anything, but that's okay. I don't want to get into that one. Like I said, I don't want to hold up you guys' dinner. Okay, the one question too I had was, I did read a little bit of the public hearing that you had for these rules and regs. And I noticed that the names that were there, the people that showed up, you had everyone from Naval Base, Unitech, Hydro Air Pacific, Guam Petroleum, NAFAC, Marianas, Anderson. I don't know why the skilled nursing unit in Barragata is there, but you had several people there to voice their concerns or anything with these rules and regs. And your minutes of your meeting was, I think it was only 2 questions the whole entire time. So that was my concern, is to look at the feedback from the community or the businesses of the establishments that hold these underground storage tanks, if they have any concerns. And this was on September 11th, 2019. You extended it to 2011, extended it to the 19th to provide information. So you met those requirements, and I really didn't see anything, Michael, during this public hearing that you had any concerns about it. So, and like I said, all those people that I mentioned are stakeholders. So I thank you for that. The only thing I ask is that, can you please send, maybe to the chairman or me directly, could you please send me your version of rules and regs searchable file? Can you send it in a searchable file? Or is that on the website in a searchable file, or your rules and regs? That's all I'm requesting. That's it, Madam Chair. So Michael, if you can, searchable files on rules and regs. It makes it easier for our staff as well as myself to review it and just type in the name. But other than that, thank you so much, Madam Chair, for the opportunity and the thorough questions that you provided this evening. It was very helpful and educational, that's for sure. Thank you.
Senator Tello. And I really would like to extend my sincere thanks to Guam EPA, Michael, for doing such a great job. Don, Mavani, Vincent, Conchita, Walter, and if there's anybody that I missed, please, I want to extend my thanks to all of you for all the hard work that you are doing. And yes, we definitely need to get a pipeline going. And I'm not talking about an oil pipeline, but a successional pipeline to ensure that we have expertise to continue the regulatory work that is so desperately needed for our community, to ensure that we have that it's safe for our environment and our people. So is there anything else that anybody else would like to say before we conclude?
Just Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to EPA. Thank you.
Thank you,
Senator.
Thank you, Senators. We appreciate your support.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for supporting us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Merry Christmas too. Happy holidays.
Okay, so the committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. on Friday, December 11th, 2020. Please address testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation Procurement, or it could be dropped off at the mailboxes of the Guam Congress Building, or preferably emailed to the office at senatorperez.org. Being that there are no further testimonies or questions, Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation Procurement will now adjourn. The time is now 6:13 p.m. Seduz Masi, and take care, everybody. Thank you.